Hey soldiers, it looks like that balloon from China really was sent over here to spy for China to collect valuable information, most likely from our military bases, which was allowed to fly right over. Now, the State Department and the U.S. government is releasing some information, and I know what you're going to say. Well, do we believe what the U.S. This is the same government that did Gulf of Tonkin, Tuskegee experiment, and a whole lot of, yeah, sure, you're right. So we got to approach it with some healthy skepticism, but you got government against government. So you got to choose who you're going to believe. You're going to believe China or you're going to believe the United States of America. China already came out and said, hey, look, this is our balloon. Now, they said it was for collecting weather. They got weather in China. They can do that over there. This thing was to get valuable intelligence information from the United States. Now, look, if we go to war with China, it's going to disrupt our economy big time, okay? We get approximately $2.8 trillion worth of imports from China. And look, I've talked about it ad nauseum before, okay? This thing is just crazy. We get iron, steel, plastics. We get pharmaceuticals, electrical equipment, all types of machinery. And the list goes on and on and on, okay? Not to mention all of the stuff you find in Walmart, from clothing. And look, Apple is actually entertaining moving their operations out of China. There are other countries that could do that type of work, specifically India. And India is not an adversary with us like China is. We have a very tenuous relationship with China based on economics. And then they have territorial ambitions with regard to Taiwan. And the question remains whether or not we're going to be involved in that. So there is a long, long list, you're looking at it now, of things that we get from China. Okay, and all of this is bound to be disrupted should there be a war. And it's looking more and more likely that China is trying to collect some information because they mean to go into Taiwan. Okay, and they want all types of information on us. That's smart, you know. Before you go to war, you gather as much information as possible, right? So this is what's going on. This is what the United States is saying. The Chinese balloon that crossed the U.S. carried antennas and sensors for collecting intelligence and communications. This is according to Biden administration officials, laying out the most detailed evidence to date about China's surveillance program. This, and we're going to get into this, this thing is, as the sentence just stated, a program. This wasn't a one-off. Were you aware that South Korea also noticed a balloon in their territory? Okay, Mexico in their territory. Of course, the balloon that got to Montana had to traverse Canada to get here. So these are allies of the United States. Canada and Mexico, they are neighbors. All right, so it gets interesting. The new information was described Thursday. That's today for me, yesterday for you, the 9th of February. This new information was described Thursday by a range of officials from the Pentagon, State Department, and FBI as the administration prepared to take unspecified action against companies and entities linked to the Chinese balloon program that the U.S. says has spied on more than 40 countries across 5 continents. I'd be interested to know what those countries were, who those countries are, rather, because we want to look and see how strongly allied with America they are. This thing is pretty pervasive. Now, they're talking about taking unspecified actions against companies, but it is clear nothing happens. No one is going to build these balloons in their workshop in the back of their house in China and just send them up. That ain't happening, okay? That ain't happening here in terms of the intent that these balloons had. You're not building spycraft and then allowing it to go up and not going to hear from the U.S. authorities. And you damn sure ain't doing that over in China with Xi, all right? He knew about this. They're saying they're weather balloons. False. Much of the information came from tracking the balloon over 8 days as it traversed the U.S. last week before being shot down off the coast of the Atlantic Ocean on Saturday. Now, they already knew that the balloon was endowed with surveillance capability, but they let it continue. Our military, our government here in America just let it happen. And from what I understand, South Korea did the same thing. And they didn't even take any action to destroy the one that was over their country. So God knows what it transmitted back. And remember, we have a lot of forces in South Korea. Images captured by high-altitude U-2 surveillance planes showed that the balloon was equipped with multiple antennas, including an array likely capable of pinpointing the location of communications, a senior State Department official said. Those U-2 and other reconnaissance flights also found that the balloon carried large solar panels capable of powering an array of intelligence collection sensors. The manufacturer of the balloon has a direct relationship with the Chinese military, the State Department official said. Of course they do. All right? This thing wasn't built by, some recreational company over in China. This was built by the equivalent of their Northrop Grumman or their Lockheed Martin. Of course they have a relationship. It's a defense contractor. More information is expected in coming days as personnel from the FBI examine components of the surveillance equipment that are being retrieved from the waters near the coast of South Carolina. Around noon on Thursday, the Navy suspended the use of divers in the search due to weather, and the delay, a defense official said, could last into the weekend. All right, by providing detailed information, the administration is trying to buttress its case that the craft was designed for high-altitude spying, not, as China said, for civilian weather research. It is also trying to dispel criticism from Congress about its handling of the balloon. The handling of the balloon by the United States was just abominable. I mean, unprofessional. Now it comes to light the purpose of this balloon. I am surprised the United States government, and this is another reason why I believe every word of this, because the United States government, they are more prone to saying something like, well, yeah, we researched it, and in fact, it was a weather balloon, in order to deflect, any kind of scrutiny with regard to the actions that were taken or more appropriately not taken. The House, which is controlled, of course, by the Republican majority, whose members have criticized the administration over the balloon, they passed a resolution 419-0 Thursday, condemning China for its brazen. I'm sure China is just, so regretful that we actually, they're never going to do it again. We actually passed a resolution. Great. The resolution called the act a brazen violation of United States sovereignty and called on the White House to provide more information. A strongly worded letter. This is how we responded. Now, look, I'm not suggesting we start lobbing nukes, all right? But I am suggesting that we, as the American people, start to understand what's going on here. This has an economic component to it big time. As I said before, we import from China a crap load of very important things. Now, of course, we've got all manner of junk that's sitting up in Walmart that's coming from China, but we also have pharmaceuticals. I've talked about this many times. You take penicillin. All right. The majority of our penicillin comes from China. You take that off the shelf. just go back and look at what the world was like before penicillin, and you'll start to get the gist here. Many of you, this is a smart audience. I know you already know. Now, appropriately, much of the congressional focus was on what steps the Pentagon plans to take in the future to prevent further incursions, and why the balloon was not shot down as it passed over the Aleutian Islands. This is out in the wilderness of Alaska. There's literally no man's land. It passed over those islands on the 28th of January. And I'm sure the Chinese were sitting back like, I can't believe what's going on. They are not taking any action. We're making it happen. Okay. And it went over other parts of Alaska, down through Canada. Then it showed up in Montana. And there's a senator from Montana who said he was receiving calls from constituents from citizens asking, hey, is it okay to shoot this thing down? Okay. Montana, they love the Second Amendment, and I stand right behind them on that. Excellent. But the problem is we even the 50 caliber doesn't have the reach to touch something like that balloon at the altitudes that it was at. But bravo for the Montana citizens who were asking, hey, look, Sleepy Joey Bananas, he's not going to do anything. Can we go ahead and take this thing down now? All it has done is gotten some footage of the Aleutian Islands, and it came over the border in Montana and got a picture of some cows, and that's it for now. But no, flew over our nuclear missile silos and several military bases, and the United States just let it happen. And look, it's not like the balloon had to go back to China to, drop off the information that it received. Of course, it was transmitting the information. All right, and now it's time for the silliness of politics. After the closed-door meeting that was held in the Senate, some Republican senators said they had a better understanding of the administration's decisions, though questions remained, including about what the U.S. gained from allowing the balloon to pass over the U.S. I'll translate that. What you really mean to say is, what did China gain? What could we have gained? All right. We've got the balloon in our possession right now. What's left of it. They particularly praised the military's response. Well, sure, the hardworking men and women of the military below flag level, they're doing their job. They're doing as ordered. Okay. You can't have somebody that's a lieutenant commander or an enlisted man or woman say, hey, let's go take care of that. That's just not how it works. But the brass, Milley, and former military officer Austin, who is now the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, politicians through and through, all right? It's not like the old days where you had General Patton and MacArthur and guys like that, all right? Pentagon officials in testimony to a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense said that the balloon was not deemed to be a threat as it crossed Alaska, where it didn't pass over any sensitive sites. Wasn't a threat. So it's in your airspace. It's not from America. It is from a country that has this, strange relationship where we get along on some issues, but, we're basically probably going to go to war, as the Air Force general said, within 2 years. And it wasn't deemed a threat. Now, look, maybe this indicates why I will never be president of the United States, because that bad boy would have been taken out over the Aleutian Islands. Well, Tyrone, we couldn't have recovered it. And yes, we could have. We can recover whatever we want, okay, wherever we want. Might have been a little bit more challenging, but look into the incident of the Glomar Explorer. Okay, look into that whole thing. And you'll quickly find that we can recover whatever we want, whenever we want. And, they go on and on about the risk to the people on the ground. There was no one on the ground in the middle of nowhere, Montana. Okay, come on, you can't get me to believe that you were afraid of this thing coming down over rural Montana because you didn't want it to hurt any people, but then you allowed it to traverse really densely populated areas in other states. What if it had just had a malfunction and fallen out? Fallen out of the sky? Did you think about that? So no, I'm not buying this from the U.S. military. They're trying to sell this thing. Once you take a shot, you can't take it back. Exactly. We don't want our military to take back shots. You're not a police force. You're supposed to protect us from these external threats. Why do we pay all these taxes? To protect us from the barbarians at the gate, right? Well, the barbarians got through the gate. Trojan balloon. They already have Trojan balloons, but they're used for a different purpose. And then this General Sims goes on to say, I think it's important for us to remember that if we establish a precedent, we may meet the same precedent. So he's saying if we shoot stuff down, then they might shoot us down. We may create something that is to our detriment. But you shot it down. So you've already created the precedent. The U.S. has conducted reconnaissance flights in international airspace close to China's territorial limits, drawing frequent objections from Beijing In December, a Chinese J-11 fighter flew within 20 feet of a U.S. RC-135 surveillance plane near the South China Sea islands controlled by Beijing. 20 feet. That is close when you're talking about being on the water or in the air. The Pentagon testimony did not assuage some lawmakers, particularly Senator Lisa Murkowski, a Republican from Alaska. Ms. Murkowski said that the Pentagon appeared to be treating potential threats to her state as a secondary concern. She said, "At what point do we say a surveillance balloon, a spy balloon coming from China, is a threat to our sovereignty?" Exactly. She said, "It should be the minute it crosses the line. And that line is Alaska." You know, she's right about that. They have treated Alaska like, well, it's just Alaska, you know. Well, when it gets inside 495 and closes on D.C., then maybe we'll do something about it. So this was a very weak response. China already copped to it before it was blown out of the sky. They let you know, who was doing it. I mean, anybody with a third grade education could tell that this was over here to surveil sensitive areas, which it was allowed to do. All right. So they're trying to do damage control and clean this up, but it's an absolute disaster. And it could be a prelude to greater conflict economically and militarily. And I would hate to see that, but you don't send surveillance equipment over these sensitive areas unless you are doing some pre-planning. And you don't need to be G.I. Joe in order to understand that common sense notion. Now, what I do want you to do is take a look at this report we did about an Air Force general ordering his forces to prepare for war with China. He says it's coming up shortly. Check out that report, guys. I'll talk to you soon.